Good morning. It's good to have everyone out this morning. I believe it's the last Sunday Brother Titus will be with us. But we have really enjoyed him and appreciate all your comments in class. We continue to pray for your future work. All right, let's turn it down a little bit there. Yeah, we continue to pray for your future work, Brother Titus, and really enjoy you being here. Okay, we're going to try to wrap it up today. The divided kingdom, and that's where we are finishing this quarter, and next quarter, Brother Todd will be taking on Judah alone. But before we begin today, let's go ahead and go through our time periods. Before the flood, the scattering of the people, the patriarchs, the Exodus, the wandering in the wilderness, the invasion and conquest of Canaan, the judges, and the united kingdom, and the divided kingdom, Judah alone, and the captivity, return from captivity, the years of silence, and the life of Christ, and the early church, and letters to the Christians. And so as we have seen, we are finishing up the divided kingdom this morning. We got down into lesson 11, and we're going to try to make it through as much as possible and get into lesson 12 and make a few final comments about that. So we got down to question 2. Again, this lesson here is Ahaz and Pekah. We've looked at that. We see there that Pekah is one of the kings, one of the last kings of Israel, and we already see that the Assyrian Empire is heavily involved with the situation here. And then we have Ahaz as one of the kings of Judah as we follow that as well. Number 2, who came up, we talked about this just a little bit before the end of the class last week. Who came up against Ahaz and who was responsible for this, and had anything like this happen in the past? So Ahaz being the king of Judah, and so someone came up against him. Yeah, Norm?
Aram, or Syria, and both them and Israel.
Okay, so we have Israel, God's people were part of the divided kingdom here, coming up against their own brethren, along with Syria as well. Anyone else on that? All right. It said in 2 Chronicles chapter 28 and verse 5, therefore the Lord his God delivered him into the hand of the king of Syria. They defeated him and carried away a great number. And Isaiah 7, we studied Isaiah 7. I'm sorry, I missed that this morning. Does everybody have questions? Everybody? We do have some questions in the back. Anyone else need questions? All right. Thank you, Jesse, for that. Yeah. Okay. So, 2 Chronicles 20 verse 5 says, they carried away a multitude of them as captives and brought them to Damascus. And then he was also delivered into the hand of the king of Israel, who defeated him with a great slaughter. And then we see where Isaiah, of course, was sent to Ahaz, and we've studied about that briefly in Isaiah chapter 7. So, interesting enough, instead of Ahaz turning to God, he turned to others for help. He turned to Syria for help. 1 Kings chapter 15, and we see that in 2 Chronicles chapter 16 as well. So had anything like this ever happened before? Yeah.
It's very common. It was very common, and it's still common today. Go to any place else but God first, and see if you can do it on your own. And then you go to the world, and we see examples all the way back to the beginning. You got, all the way back in the time of the judges, where they weren't supposed to mix and match with people. They did, and got corrupted. Solomon had, of course, through all of his marriages, he had that problem. He had examples of Ahab and Jehoshaphat. Again, the righteous, supposedly righteous, seeking the unrighteous for their worldly assistance, thinking that that's going to solve their worldly problem. It's never a worldly problem, it's a spiritual problem.
Okay. Yeah, actually, the part of the question, yeah, they had, with the Norman Salvation, King of Israel came up against Asa there, Asa, and I mentioned those verses. Also in 2 Chronicles 13, Abijah, king of Judah, fought against Jeroboam, king of Israel. Despite being outnumbered there in Judah, Judah called upon the Lord there to achieve the victory. And of course, in the case we're studying today, Ahaz didn't call upon the Lord. All right, any other comments on that? Number 3, how did 2 Chronicles 28 verse 8 describe the relationship between Israel and Judah? And I wanted you to kind of use different translations and look at that. Are there any verses in the New Testament that would describe this relationship, and what can we learn from this as Christians today? So, what did you, yeah, Norm?
In the New American Standard, it said Israel was in a rage against Judah, and basically this was God's punishment upon Judah. It just intense anger.
Okay. When we describe our relationship with each other, what do we call each other? Brothers. That's right. We call each other brothers. Different translations. Anyone look at different translations as far as that goes? Yeah,
relatives.
Yeah.
Yeah, the New American Standard says brother.
Yeah. Brothers, brethren. The NIV says fellow Israelites. And so we see a relationship there that, from the beginning, that's the way God wanted it to be. And yet we have the divided kingdom. But so basically you have Israel carrying away their fellow Israelites, their relatives, their brethren. And 200,000 women, sons, and daughters, and they also took away much spoil from them and brought the spoil to Samaria. Galatians chapter 5, verse 13 in the New Testament says that, for you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. So that's talking about certainly our relationship today. Verse 14 there says, for all the law is fulfilled in one word. Even in this you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, beware lest you be consumed by one another. Yes.
Excuse me, in Matthew 10, Jesus said, a man's enemies will be those of his own household.
Yeah.
So our own brethren, our own relatives will turn against us, as we see in this case.
Sure. And that's what they had done here. We would never treat our brethren like this, but always we need to put others before ourselves. Any other comments on that? All right, number 4, was God pleased with the outcome of what happened to Judah from those who came up against him, and what happened regarding that? So, God wanted them to go up against him because of Ahaz, but what was God pleased with all right.
God was displeased and sent the prophet Oded to tell them to send the captives back.
Yes. what happened regarding that? Yeah.
Israel had slaughtered many of the people of Judah. 2 Chronicles 28, verse 9. And as she said, they took captives. But the chief, I wrote down, but the chief men of Ephraim would not allow the captives to be brought in. And so it says it would add to their sin, and God's wrath was already great. So they left the spoils and clothed and fed the captives and took them home.
Yes. I mean, so we had some men here that realized the situation after being condemned, as April said, for what they had done. And I thought that was interesting series of verses there in 2 Chronicles 28 there, verses 8 through 15. It describes this, but yes, they fed them and dressed them and sent them home. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 6 says, "But brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers. Now therefore it is already an utter failure for you that you go to law against one another. Why do you not rather accept wrong? Why do you not rather let yourselves be cheated? Know you yourselves do wrong and cheat, and you do these things to your brethren." This is similar to 2 Chronicles 28 and verse 1. Israel realized after the prophet had come to them that their sin was just as great as the ones that they had captured. Any other comments on that? All right. Number 5, 2 Chronicles 28 points out there were some other nations that came up against Judah and Ahaz at this time. Who did Ahaz go to for help for this, and what was the final outcome of this, and what can we learn in regard to who we should rely on today? So it mentions the other nations that come up against them as well. Yeah.
Ahaz went to the king of Assyria for help. Verse 21, verse 21 states it did not help him. We must, of course, rely always on God and put our faith and trust in Him fully.
Yep. All right. Yep. Good.
And besides Israel invading, which we talked about with the captives, the Edomites were looking to get even for all the trouble they had since the time of Solomon. The Philistines also made a comeback, and they took lowland areas and a few of the villages and cities in there as well. And then, like Jesse was saying, they went to the Assyrians for help, but they were more of a non-help than they were a help.
Yes. Yeah, like you said, more. Yeah, so the Edomites, the Philistines, the Philistines in 2 Chronicles 28 and verse 18 took several places. But this has always been a thorn in their side, in God's people's side. Why? This is what we've studied all the way through the Old Testament. Even from the beginning when his people crossed over Jordan and he told them to take the land. They didn't do what the Lord said even from the beginning, and so you still have, after these hundreds of years, that these people are still a thorn in their side, and of course God is still using them because of the sins of his own people, and Ahaz here as well. But it said, the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser had already, he agreed, but yet he was only doing this for his own good. And then it said that he distressed Ahaz there in 2 Chronicles 28 and verse 16 and 20. He says he came to him and distressed him and did not assist him there. And he was, like I said, doing all this for his own good. So when it comes to problems that we face as individuals and as a church, we should always rely on God, of course. God is the faithful one. Any other comments on that? I'm thinking Ahaz knew about, David, of course. He didn't live his life like David, but one of the Psalm 46 that David wrote, if Ahaz would have read about that, certainly he would have turned to God. Isaiah also told Ahaz what to do in Isaiah chapter 7. We briefly studied that. But Psalm 46 is a good passage. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, and though the mountains slip into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains quake as its swelling pride. But the whole psalm there is good. Psalm 146 and verse 3 says, do not put your trust in princesses, nor in a son of man in whom there is no help. His spirit departs, he returns to his earth, and that very day his plans perish. And happy is he who has the God of Jacob for his help, whose hope is in the Lord his God. Any other comments on that one? Number 6, what was Elijah the priest's role during this period? And were his actions consistent with the priestly responsibilities established by God? Oh, somebody didn't die. I got a little help in the back there, so I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. He says he built a replica of the altar from a model that King Ahaz had sent to the priest. And no, he did not, his actions were not consistent with the commands of God.
Yeah.
He rather listened to the king, which was a very evil king.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what Ken was talking about, literally he's copying the pagan god, and then coming down, putting that altar, building that altar in the temple, and that basically Ahaz came up with his own religion.
Yes.
Here, and I choose to do this, and I choose not to do that, and this, and it was whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah. Any other comments on that one? Yeah, so he was a corrupt priest, and we've studied about those as well. He wouldn't go against Ahaz. In 2 Kings 16 and verse 16, it said, thus did Elijah the priest according to all that King Ahaz commanded, not what God had commanded the priest to do. And so, the temple was desecrated. And again, as Brother Ken said, he set up his own religion, so to speak. And this is the king of Judah now we're talking about. And several of them, of course, have been good kings. And this is one of the worst kings that we've studied about so far. He built high places in every single city in Judah, it says. The priest certainly wasn't fulfilling his role as he should have. Any other comments on that one? Yeah, Norm.
I thought it was interesting. He said, in talking about the high places and places where he built things, he said, and under every green tree.
That's right.
And there weren't that many green trees. I mean,
Yeah.
But every place where there was something that was good and growing, they had one of these pagan.
If they had a little shade somewhere, they built an altar to worship a foreign god. All right, number 7, 2 Kings 16 verse 13 describes similar offerings we read about in earlier history of God's people that were offered at this time. So let's contrast what we read here with what God commanded his people concerning these offerings. And of course we talked about Ahaz desecrating the temple, but was there a problem with any of this? I just answered the question, but any comments on that one? All right, so 2 Kings 16 verse 13 says he burned his burnt offering. Notice what it says there. It says, so he burned his burnt offering, his grain offering, and he poured his drink offering and sprinkled the blood of his peace offering on the altar. It was all his doings. And so we're talking about the king here, right? And we studied some about this before. Who had the responsibility to do all that? The priests and the Levites. Numbers chapter 18 talks about that, verses 5 and several verses following there. So here we have kind of like a double sin, you might say. Ahaz served as a priest to an altar of his own design, not God's design. And there's some terrible things that he did here. It was kind of, who was his grandfather, you remember? Who went into the temple to do his own thing?
Oh, and got leprosy.
Uzziah. So you remember King Uzziah, what did he do? He went into the temple, but it was the temple that had been designed by God. So, but Ahaz went into a temple designed by him and desecrated and offered. So we have a double whammy here. So he wasn't quite as worse as his father, or he was worse than his father Uzziah here. He falsely worshipped the true God, but falsely worshipped the false God there, if you will. So yeah, terrible things. Any other comments on that one? Yeah, Norm.
Just the contrast there that you're talking about, where you had the true temple with the true worship that was being desecrated by the king, and the king was immediately punished for that. We remember they got the leprosy and never could do anything else again. That was God punishing him for that degradation. Here, you got a king who has desecrated the temple. So this temple was no longer God's temple, and God allowed him to continue doing that. But the consequences ended up for the kingdom of Judah down the road, because he had already separated himself from God.
Okay.
And so they were past the point of no return, basically.
All right. Ken, do you have your hand up?
I was just going to say that he made a mockery of
Yeah.
everything God had commanded.
Yep. Yeah. Number 8, thinking Ahaz had stopped the stooped as low as one could get. He described what 2 Chronicles 28 and verse 22 says concerning him and why he was described that way. And can sin affect us in this way today? If so, what can we learn from the life of Ahaz? Anyone? Yeah, no.
We hear this a lot from gospel preachers, but it's because it's true. Sin will take you farther than you wanted to go, and that's the description here. Is that he went farther than anybody could possibly imagine. Just at the height, when you think he's at the lowest point, then he could still stoop lower. And that's what sin will do to you. It'll take you farther than you want to go and keep you there longer than you want to stay, and etc.
Yeah. All right. Verse 23 says, for he sacrificed to the gods of Damascus, which had defeated him, saying, because the gods of the kings of Syria helped them, I will sacrifice to them that they may help me. And notice what it says, but they were the ruin of him and all Israel. And so this has been the problem, again, with Judah and Israel. If they sin against God, a judgment's going to come upon them. And we've already talked about, he desecrated the temple for sure, and he just continued to spiral into sin, and one sin will lead to another. This is the lessons that certainly we need to be aware of. Hebrews chapter 3 in verse 12 says, beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God, but encourage and exhort one another daily while it is still today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. And Colossians chapter 3 and verse 1 says, if then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience. You know, despite Ahaz's failure, God sent a prophet to call the people to repentance. And I want you to think about that. We have the voice of the prophets calling us today. Not only the prophets, but we have the apostles as well calling us today to repentance. I'm reminded of Hebrews 10 and verse 26, for if we go on sinning willfully after we've received the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. We sing the song sometimes, number 820, God calling yet. God calling yet. Some good words there to pay attention to. Any other comments on lesson 11? Okay. Lesson 12, Hosea, Hezekiah, and the destruction of Israel. So we're looking at Hosea there, and he's, of course, the last king of Israel. We see the time period when Assyria captured them. We'll talk briefly about that. And here are the kings of Assyria that were involved with this. And also we have Hezekiah of Judah, and we studied the prophets already that have been associated with that. So Hosea is the last king. I said Hezekiah, but Hosea is the last king of Hezekiah. Hosea is the last king of Israel. How was he described as a king, and what caused his downfall? Anyone? Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
He did evil in God's sight.
Yeah.
He became a vassal of Assyria, but tried to form an alliance with Egypt. He refused to pay tribute to Assyria, and Assyria came after him.
Yeah. Yes, he did. But notice, it's interesting, he said he did evil side of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel who were before him. And so I thought that was interesting. He, as already mentioned, he rebelled against the king of Assyria, but did not use God, though, as a means to rebel against him. In 2 Kings 17 and verse 3, as he's already mentioned, King of Assyria came up against him, and he uncovered a conspiracy where Hosea had tried to form an alliance with the king of Egypt, and he stopped bringing tribute to the king of Assyria, and that brought his demise. But remember, God is the one in control, and through His Holy Spirit has given us the words of the Bible, of course. And He says His ways and thoughts are always higher than ours, and we are simply His created beings, and we need to serve Him. Anything else on that one? All right. Number 2, the king of Assyria took all the land of Israel and besieged the capital city. What does this mean, and how long did it last? And was the people previously warned about these events? And please provide references if applicable. So when we talk about besieging, what are we talking about there? Yes.
And you're stuck, and
That's right.
they're coming
That's
coming
right.
at you and trying to break into the city and defeat you.
That's right. And so, think about a terrible thing that happened here. But notice that they had captured many places. King 17 verse 5 says, now the king of Syria went throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it for 3 years. And so how often we go to the grocery store? Yes. Yeah, you think about that. These people were starving. They starved the people. And other passages when it talked about Jerusalem being besieged, that later on that'll be talked about. But we're talking about cannibalism that probably took place as well. But it was terrible. Joseph Benson commentary says the king of Syria came up through all the land and made himself master of it, treating the Israelites as traitors rather than as fair enemies. And as I've already mentioned, it's because Hosea had gone against him, not paid his tribute. This was in the 9th year of the reign of Hosea, at which time Israel was carried away captive into Assyria. And there we have reason to think after some time they were so mingled with the nations that they were lost, and the name of Israel was no more in remembrance. They that forgot God were themselves forgotten, and they that had studied to be like the nations were buried among them. And they that would not serve God in their own land were made to serve their enemies in a strange land. Thus ended Israel as a nation, and the prophecy of Hosea was fulfilled. They became Lo-Amni. You remember the names of his children? They became Lo-Amni, not a people, and Lo-Ruhamah, unpitied. And so the prophecy had come true that God had shown them from the beginning. And had they been warned about this before? Yeah, it's unbelievable how many times that they had been warned. David Guzik commentary said, and as they carried Israel away to Assyria, they followed their typical custom. When the Assyrians depopulated and exiled a conquered community, they led the captives away on journeys of hundreds of miles, with the captives naked and attached together with a system of strings and fish hooks pierced through their lower lips. God would make sure that they were led in this humiliating manner through the broken walls of their own conquered cities. So here is a map of what happened to the northern kingdom. They were dispersed throughout all these cities here, hundreds of miles away from their home. But and that's the way that the Assyrians would do. And if you look, then these people would come down and populate that area, and that would ensure that the country would not be inhabited no more by the children of the Israelite, the northern nation that they had captured. And I think Brother Norm has talked about this before, but go ahead.
Yeah, the Assyrians were good at again, like Babylonians. They took the best of the best captive, except the Assyrians were much crueler to the best of the best that they took. But they left the lowest class of people from that area in the area, so that the ones that were looked down upon, ironically, by those that were taken away, the upper class, the elites, and then you created a mongrel class, basically, is the way they would look at it, because they considered these lower class people just kind of dogs of society. Sure. Those were the only ones who were left, and those were the ones that repopulated with these other pagans that came in. And so you had the pagans and the dogs cohabitating and procreating, and these became the Samaritans, and it gives you an idea of why the Jews looked down so lowly upon them.
So when you read about the Samaritans in the New Testament, you give thought to this very act here that took place. Interesting enough, when we studied Amos, the prophet, Amos chapter 4, and verse 1, says, and a few verses following there, it says, hear this word, you cows of Bashan, who are on the mountains of Samaria, who oppress the poor, who crush the needy, who says to your husbands, bring wine, let us drink. We're talking about women here. And in verse 2 it says, the Lord God has sworn by his holiness, behold, the day shall come upon you when he will take you away with fish hooks, and your posterity with fish hooks. You will go out through broken walls, each one straight ahead of her, and you will be cast into Harmon, says the Lord. So it was prophesied exactly what took place here with the children with the Israelite nation, Israel's nation of Israel. Number 3, how many previous examples did Hosea have to learn from regarding how he should serve God and the consequences for not serving him? What can we learn about God from this, and what applications can we make regarding our own lives? That was kind of a general question there, so I'm kind of curious to see what people might have come up with.
As far as how many, I would say every king of Israel that had preceded him. You could see that how God had treated, responded to the way they had ruled, being so disobedient to him. And I also wrote down, God is patient and loving and desirous of his people, loving and following him, but his patience will come to an end.
Okay.
Let's be careful not to try his patience.
Yes, if you consider that, yeah, he had all the kings, and counting him, there was 19 kings. So he could look back through history and see what had happened over hundreds of years, 200 years here, to be exact, around this amount of time that took place there. And but some of you may have other numbers too. He had probably some faithful priests and stuff, and prophets that talked to him and encouraged him as well. So we had a lot of good examples. Yeah, Norm.
And Israel is a great example of learning the wrong lesson from there. Because you remember during the period of time, Israel had its ups and downs. There were periods of prosperity. There was increases in territory and everything. They were actually more prosperous than Judah at times. And if you take the lesson of just follow the gods around me and whatever I want to do, during times of prosperity, that's the wrong lesson to take. And they got that continual lesson. It was almost like, well, God doesn't care, and there's no, it doesn't matter what I do, and maybe it's all luck or whatever. I mean, they were learning the wrong lesson, and over that period of time, where the kings of Judah, for the most part, picked up on the right lessons, even if they were in times of deep distress. Many times they made the right choice and went to God, and they came out much better in the end.
Okay. So yes, we had seen that from Hosea chapter 8 and verse 7, they had sown the wind and reaped the whirlwind, as we just got through studying about. Any other comments on that one? 2 Kings 17:23 describes in detail the relationship God had with Israel from their exodus out of Egypt until they were destroyed as a nation. And so let's contrast the character of God versus the people throughout all of this, and do we see a similar relationship with man today? So we have this relationship between God and his people throughout the history that we've already talked about. What do you see there? What's that?
God doesn't change, so he's always been the same.
God doesn't change. Okay.
Men are unfaithful, but God is always faithful to his promises.
Right. So as we see, God doesn't change. So he made had a covenant relationship with his people. He was faithful to this covenant. Never changed. Verse 7 there says that God is faithful to his covenant, having delivered Israel from slavery, and constantly wanting to maintain a relationship with them. And his actions throughout history, of course, has demonstrated this. But again, verse 7 talks about Israel continued in contrast to rebel against that.
God is patient, and he was long-suffering in the case of them, whereas they tended to do what people of the world would do, which is react to the thing that's happening right now, whatever seems the most, in my own opinion, what's the best thing to do. I'm just going to do that and hope for the best and take what's mine and murder and steal, whatever it takes to get the pleasure of the moment.
Okay. Yeah. Did you have anything? Sure. Okay. So think about it today. God, as we talked about, he's faithful to his covenant. He is merciful and patient. We talked about, but God is just. He brings justice on the people. God keeps his promises even when justice is served, and he promises people he would do that, and he did it. And so you think about us today, God continues to hold his promises to us today. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 23 talks about this, but of course man continues to sin. God continues to be merciful today, but man continues to sin. God loves and wants us to be faithful to him. James chapter 4 and verse 8. Again, but man continues to sin. But so I want us to think about this as Christians today. Let's don't continue to sin. Let's serve God because of his relationship he has with us and because of his mercy and patience, but understand his justice is too. And one day it will come, if not in this time, but will come at judgment. Any other comments on that one? Let me look here and see if there's anything. Todd will be getting into Hezekiah next lesson. I don't. But so let's just quickly just talk about Hezekiah. Israel had fallen, number 6. Israel had fallen, but God continues to allow Judah to exist as a nation. And Hezekiah is a contributing factor. What was one of the initial? What were some of the things Hezekiah did that allowed Judah to continue to exist as a nation? Yeah.
And he starts establishing the priesthood, and he's bringing it back to the Levites, which we haven't seen in a long time, going back to Levitical priesthood like the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And you have another list of like a bunch of names, and like it's easy to just like kind of read through that, but let's kind of put an emphasis on the fact that they're going back to, we need to make sure these men are from the tribe of Levi, and that they're coming from this family line. There's instructions through the law.
That's exactly right. So he went back to the commandments of God. He went back to Moses. He understood what needed to be done. And you remember who his father was? Ahaz, the worst king, of Judah. But I wanted you to notice something too in verse 1 or 2 Chronicles 29 and verse 1. His mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah. There's actually a reference in Isaiah 8 and verse 2 that may be him. And so Hezekiah would have been influenced to the good by a mom. And we've studied that before, how important moms are in teaching their children correctly. And another thing too, he was 25 years old when all this began. So another young king taking on a strong leadership role. And because of his being a good and faithful king, Judah continued to survive this. Any other comments on that? Enjoyed my study with you, and Brother Todd will be taking over next week with Judah alone.